They dragged the judge into the square, slit his throat, and peeled the skin from his body while the crowd watched in horror. Strip by strip, his flesh was torn away until nothing remained but a grotesque shell. But the true cruelty came after. His flayed skin was tanned, cut into leather, and stretched across the very chair where justice was once delivered. This shocking story comes to us from the ancient historian Herodotus. It's a tale of justice so extreme it feels more like a horror movie than a history lesson. But is it real or just a terrifying piece of political propaganda? Today we're digging into the historical records to uncover the truth behind the gruesome fate of the corrupt Persian judge. We'll separate history from horrifying legend and ask what this story, fact or fiction, tells us about power and justice in the ancient world. Our story kicks off in the 6th century BCE inside the massive Achaemenid Empire of Persia. This empire was built on conquest, sure, but it was held together by a surprisingly complex system of law. At the very top was the King of Kings, a ruler whose power was seen as absolute, a gift from the gods themselves. The king in our story is Cambyses II, the son of Cyrus the Great. Ancient sources paint Cams as a volatile and ruthless leader known for his violent temper and extreme cruelty. Now, whether that reputation is totally deserved or just hostile propaganda from his enemies is a debate for another day. What's clear, though, is that he was a king who did not mess around when it came to his authority. Serving under Cambyses was a royal judge named Sis. In the Persian system, judges had a huge amount of responsibility. They were the king's hands of justice, expected to uphold the law fairly for everyone, for the empire to work, for trade to flow, and for society to stay in one piece. People had to trust the system. A corrupt judge wasn't just ripping off one person. He was poisoning the entire well of public trust and chipping away at the king's own power. Sisamnes was supposed to be a man of integrity, but as our main source tells us, he had a fatal flaw: greed. The story, as told by the Greek historian Herodotus in his famous work, The Histories, is chillingly simple. Judge Sisamnes was overseeing a court case when one of the parties offered him a big pile of money to rule in their favor. Sisamnes took the bribe, delivered a bogus verdict, and betrayed his office, the law, and his king. You can almost imagine Sisam feeling pretty safe in an empire that stretched for thousands of miles. What were the odds that one crooked ruling would get back to the King of Kings? But whispers of injustice have a funny way of traveling. Whether an official complaint was filed or the king's network of spies picked it up, word of the judge's crime reached Cambyses II. Herodotus is light on the details of the investigation, but you can just picture the cold fury building in Cams. This wasn't just a dishonest employee. It was a deep betrayal. It was an act that screamed to the world that Persian justice was for sale and for a king whose power depended on maintaining order. That was unforgivable. He ordered Sisamnes to be arrested on the spot. The judge, who was probably out enjoying his new cash, was suddenly seized by the king's guards. His world was about to come to a horrifying end. What happened next wasn't a quiet execution. Cambyses decided to make an example of Sisamnes, a lesson so graphic and terrifying that no official in his empire would ever forget it. The punishment was as creative as it was cruel. Sisamnes was dragged into the public square. There, by order of the king, the judge's throat was slit and he was flayed alive. The act of flaying a person is just pure brutality. It's slow, it's agonizing, and it's designed to maximize the horror for everyone watching. This wasn't quiet justice. This was political theater with a crystal-clear message. This is what happens when you betray the public's trust. It's easy to imagine the king himself presiding over the event, his presence hammering home that the law wasn't some abstract idea. It was his law, and this was his justice. But the horror didn't stop there. Cambyses had a second, even more twisted act in his plan. He ordered that Sisam's skin be carefully tanned and cut into leather strips. These strips were then taken to the very courtroom where Sisamnes used to sit, and there they were used to upholster the judicial chair. With that grisly task finished, Cambyses summoned Otain, the son of the disgraced Judge Sisamnes, in a move that is almost impossible for us to wrap our heads around. The king appointed Otanes to take his father's place. Think about the state of mind of this young man. He had just seen, or at the very least known, about his father's horrific death. Now he was being handed his father's job by the very man who ordered it. As Otain prepared to take his seat, Cambyses gave him one last bone-chilling instruction. Never forget what you're sitting on. Every single day, as Otans presided over his court, he would be forced to sit on a chair literally wrapped in his own father's skin. Every case he heard, every verdict he passed down would be done while in physical contact with a grotesque monument to corruption. It was a constant physical reminder of his father's crime and the king's brutal, unwavering justice. The message was impossible to miss. Do your job with integrity, or you could be next. So that's the story. A corrupt judge, an enraged king, and a punishment straight out of a nightmare. It's a powerful story that has been told for centuries. But the big question is, did it actually happen? This is where history gets interesting. Our only source for this event is Herodotus. And while he's called the father of history, he was also a fantastic storyteller who loved a dramatic tale that made a good point. What's really telling is that there are no known Persian records that back this up. No court documents, no royal inscriptions, nothing. And this is a big deal. The Persian Empire was a record-keeping society. You'd think an event this public and this dramatic involving a royal judge would have been written down somewhere. On top of that, the punishment itself just feels so symbolic. Skinning a man to upholster a chair is so theatrical, it reads more like a fable. It's a story perfectly crafted to teach a lesson about judicial integrity and the absolute power of the king. It works as what historians call an exemplum justitiae, a gruesome example of justice made to be unforgettable. Herodotus might have heard this story on his travels, maybe as a scary tale told among officials, and wrote it down because it was such a vivid look into the Persian concept of justice. So while we can't say with 100% certainty that it never happened, the total lack of other evidence and the fairy tale nature of the punishment strongly suggests the story is at best an exaggeration. More likely, it's a powerful legend crafted to send a message. Corruption is a disease, and you have to cut it out in the most brutal way possible to keep the kingdom healthy. Fact or folklore, the story of Sisamnes had an incredibly long life. It was retold by Roman authors and medieval scholars, always as the ultimate warning against corruption. But its most famous legacy isn't in a book. It's on a canvas. In 1498, almost 2,000 years after the supposed event, the painter Gerard David was hired by the city of Bruges to create a piece of art for the town hall. The result was a stunning and graphic two-panel painting called the Judgment of Cambs. The left panel shows the moment the king confronts and arrests Sisamnes. The right panel is an unflinching clinical depiction of the fleeing itself. This masterpiece wasn't just for decoration. It was hung in the very room where the city's magistrates made their legal decisions. It was that exemplum justitiae brought to life, a daily reminder to the judges of Bruges of what happens when you betray your office. David even updated the scene, dressing the Persian court in 15th century Flemish clothes to make the ancient warning feel immediate and personal. To this day, the painting has been used as a symbol by protesters against judicial corruption, proof of the story's enduring power. In the end, whether a man named Sisamnes was literally skinned alive is maybe less important than why. This story has been told and retold for over 2.5 millennia. It's a story about the timeless struggle between power and integrity, between greed and public duty. It's a brutal reminder that a just legal system is the foundation of a stable society, and that betraying it is one of the worst crimes someone in power can commit. The image of the judge's son, forced to sit on a chair made from his own father's skin, is a masterpiece of psychological terror. It suggests the consequences of corruption aren't just paid by the guilty, but are passed down to the next generation, fact or legend. It remains one of history's most powerful and disturbing cautionary tales. What do you think? Was this a real event or a brilliantly crafted piece of political propaganda? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this trip to the darker side of ancient history, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more stories. Thanks for watching.